Good to see you, Lisa.
Two back from sunny Colorado. Nice visit. Good to see you and Bree in person.
Well, speaking of timing,
Yeah.
let's take that transitional window. Sounds like you were listening to a really interesting podcast that goes into today's topic, but the what really inspired this topic today, which is when to keep pushing forward, when to really have faith in what you're doing versus abandoning a solution or feeling like you're not making progress. Um, there's a lot that goes into this. So, hopefully we can get through a lot, but tell us a little bit about the podcast, kind of what you heard, and then how that's relevant to the topic we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. I was listening to the show Diary of a CEO yesterday, and I cannot remember the woman's name that's on it. We could probably drop the episode in our comments if people are interested. But one of the things that she talked about is what we talk about all the time in habitual growth, which is intentional action and avoiding that space of analysis by paralysis by taking action and moving in some direction. And she used the phrase, when you move, creates information. Movement creates information, which then allows you to assess situations in a different light or with more information than you previously had. And I thought that was a really interesting way of talking about action in a way that then drives more information so you can make better decisions, which bleeds into this topic today, where you feel like you might be in a spot where, am I even making progress in the right direction? I feel like I'm not seeing the results, and not losing faith in that moment, but to keep pushing forward because you know that action creates information, which will ultimately allow you eventually to see, am I headed in the right direction? Am I getting the results that I want to be getting? Or do I now have more information that I know I need to pivot or maybe take different action or action in a different capacity?
Yeah, no, that's great. The action creates more information. That informational piece is so important. I actually haven't thought about it in the capacity, that capacity. So when you said that, that actually made a lot of sense to me because a lot of people, it's common knowledge, right? Most people abandon things before they can actually make traction, whether that's your annual like New Year's resolutions, right? It's the quitter Friday or whatever you talk about, where it's like the second Friday and everybody abandons, whether it's trying something new and it just isn't sticking. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that where we are worried about failure, but in that failure sense, there is a piece where you just need time. And Andy Priscilla talks about this a lot, and I think is very understated because everybody talks about the failure piece, but there is a tremendous amount of what I would say variability in the whys to how people get to the conclusion that they need to abandon ship. Timing is definitely one of them. I mean, if you're not in this for the long haul, and this is actually why we set habitual growth up in the capacity that we do, you need to be in the app. You need to be using it consistently every day and working towards your goals for a minimum of 90 days straight. Then you can start to potentially see some progress. And I use the word potentially very specific there because it's just like going to the gym. You can go to the gym for, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 60 days, however long, and you're not going to see any changes. But if you do this consistently over time, 90, 120 days, you should really start to see some significant changes in your life.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have a great example of this and that I was talking to a friend today, and she's been on a path since the beginning of the year, since January 1st, of really tracking macros and working on lifting heavier. That was one of her goals of the year, was to get to a certain percentage of body fat. So she's been working, tracking macros, changing lifestyle, doing all the things. And we were talking this morning and she was like, it's so frustrating because I look in the mirror and I feel like nothing's different. I don't see anything different. People say they can, but I don't see it. And she had an appointment yesterday and she did one of those in-body scans, which measures body fat and the amount of percentage of, skeletal muscle mass. And she's like, she was all excited. And she's like, that was the information that I needed because I've actually gained 3 pounds of muscle and I've dropped like a 0.5% in body fat. So even though I can't see it in the mirror, I'm still taking the action. And I've now gotten to a point where I got more information in a different way, which confirms that I'm on the right track. And so she's going to keep going. But I think that's a great example of how we look for results in one way or in one perspective or in one thing. And if we don't see it, so in this case, it's the mirror. I don't see anything different in the mirror. But when we continue to take action, and in this case, add a different action, I'm now doing a different scan, you see results in a different way. So maybe it's not visual in this point, but there is evidence of progress being made. So yeah, it was awesome.
No, and that's a great example. And the physicality piece, I think, is so important because it is the thing about physicality in that example is you can at some point see transformational confirmation yourself. And I think the like having it in a visible world is really important when it comes to people's mentality, as an example, right? Your perseverance, your ability to overcome your internal voice, it's not as cut and dry. It's not as clear for some people. Only you know how to win those internal battles, right? And so sometimes it's like, hey, I did this thing. I convinced myself to get out of bed at 5 o'clock in the morning, right? Or I went to that gym, or, I went outside and did my walk, and nobody can tell any different, but I feel proud of myself. And so I think just understanding the longevity, the timepiece that you may not see all these things visibly is extremely important, especially when it comes to building things like skill sets or internal monologues when you're trying to really tackle your own narrative and flip your mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe I feel that, and I think you do too, in just doing things over and over and over. And, for example, talking on a podcast, right? That's something that I've been working on now for a couple of years. I still feel like it's a skill in progress, and it makes me feel good to know that I'm continuing to work on a skill, even though I don't feel like I've mastered it. And the individual podcast host, of a specific show probably has no idea that I've been working on this for 2 years. They just see the product of it today. And so I think what I also want people to hear is, people in specific moments in your life probably won't recognize the journey that you've had and the work that you've put in. So in the work, find ways to be proud of what you're doing, even if you're not all the way to the result that you are wanting to ultimately get to at this time.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's one of the things that I wanted to talk about is kind of steering this back to like when to keep pushing and have faith. In the example of the gaining the muscle for your friend, one of the things that happened is she had all these other cues that were either shared with her from her friends and her family. Maybe she was putting the work in the gym, she was getting the sweat, she was getting the reps, but she couldn't see it quite yet. And I think that's really important because for me, as an example, on the business journey, so as an entrepreneur, having started and failed at several businesses, I sometimes Bree will question, like, why are we actually doing this? Why does this actually matter? And that happens frequently to a lot of people. And we've all heard the term, right? Like, this is when everybody quits. Like, it gets hard and everybody abandons ship. And that is true. But at the same time, I was always somebody who was like, yeah, but this person answered the call, or hey, but I sold this person and it opened this door, or I'm now in this room. And so I didn't take the losses as I need to abandon ship. I took the losses as, yeah, but it did this for me. And so I think also focusing on the journey, we talk about this all the time, but if you can bring that back and say, hey, am I able to connect several dots, even if they're close together, right? Maybe one's further away, but then there's a couple that are there, but you're still moving in the right direction. You're still making traction is extremely important. It's different if you have tried all your resourcefulness, you've spent all your capital, you don't have any more time, whatever it is, and then you've decided I'm not making any more progress. But if you can start to map some of these little dots together, you're like, I'm hearing the things I want to hear, I'm seeing the things I want to see, I have the conversations that I need to have, that may be an indicator that you're on the right track. You just need to keep pushing forward.
Yeah. And I think, that's a great example. And I think it's true. I think two things. One, people only focus on this perfect end result that they're trying to achieve. And we lose the small wins that you're talking about, or the things that are actually information that we're on the right track. We overlook those because we go, yeah, but I'm not all the way there yet. So I think that's a great example. I would also say, as you continue to work and get those wins, those become sources of information that you should, yes, take as a small win, but also use that to reassess what you're doing and how you're doing and where you're headed. So you may have an additional door that opens or a conversation that goes well. What did you learn in that conversation? Is that something that you can then apply to redirect, other actions that you ultimately want to take? Or is it simply just affirmation that you're on the right track and you're going to keep doing things exactly as you've been doing? And so I think both of those are good perspectives for people as they look to keep the faith in the journey that they're on to get the end result
Yeah.
at the end. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And adding on to that, one thing that I found really powerful is, and you're actually doing this now because I see it on your selection list, which is complimenting people, right? Doing the "this is why I care or love about you" thing. This is how I view you. I have done that in my own life. I don't have it on my list, but I have found when I do that, and I say, Lisa, I know you've been working on podcasting for 2 years. You've done a great job. You're not using filler words, right? You're looking at the camera. You've got better lighting. Like, I can notice all of those details. It then actually, that information that I'm sharing with you does two things. One, it makes you feel better, right? It makes you feel like your progress is being validated by an external source, again, connecting these dots. But then two, it makes me aware of the things that I'm doing and things that, like, hey, I've won this battle internally. I know somebody hasn't shared that with me, but I actually have more information. I'm validating my own behaviors. And so I found it really powerful in my own narrative, in my own internal monologue, to be able to share with other people, hey, I see this in you because I'm also noticing these details in me.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a huge element of the personal development journey, is not only recognizing good in others and expressing that. That's a whole other skill set, being able to articulate, I see this in you, I'm proud of you, keep going. And also to see those qualities or those strengths in yourself as confirmation that you are also growing in a way that you want to grow. So yeah, I think that's an excellent point to end on, as we talk about keeping the faith and, in the space where we're not sure that we're making any headway.
Absolutely. Well, love it.
All
Great
right.
talking as always. We'll see you in a few.
Sounds great. Thanks, Nate.
Bye.